Welcome to the Rich Report, a podcast with news and information on the world of cloud computing. Today, my guest is from VoloMetrix, Ryan Fuller. He's the CEO of the company. So, Ryan, welcome to the show today.
Hey, thanks, Rich. We're calling ourselves a social enterprise intelligence company. And I'll tell you what that means. It's effectively the intersection between social enterprise tools and big data within the enterprise. So we've been around for a little over a year and a half. We're venture-backed, great leadership team that has a lot of experience both on the data and analytics and business intelligence side, as well as the management consulting, kind of organizational behavior, organizational effectiveness, business side of things. So we're a bit of a combination of all of that. You know, the problem that we're trying to solve is a big one, and it's really that, you know, organizations today are truly more complex than ever before. And, you know, 30 years ago, you could walk the halls and you could get a good sense of what was going on in the company. Just not true anymore. Everything's distributed, everything's global, everything's happening in real time. And there's so many tools and so many different types of data that are flying around, and people are just getting lost in the noise of that. So what that results in is really weak alignment between whatever an organization's strategy is and the way that they execute. So we see this all the time where companies spend lots of money creating, you know, the 5-year strategy or plan, and then they break it down into, you know, 10, 20, whatever different strategic initiatives. And then management gets together and hopes that those are being executed on well. But then when something goes wrong, it's really hard to pinpoint where it went wrong. Sometimes we've heard this analogy of imagine, you know, it's like a football coach or something that isn't allowed to watch the game and only gets to hear what the score is every quarter and then talk to the team before they go back out, but doesn't get to watch any of the plays. Right, that's a little bit what it's like to run a company nowadays, especially a large organization, because you see the quarterly earnings and then you wonder why they ended up that way. And so it's not just a problem with upper management. This is this alignment issue causes pain throughout the entire organization. It hits executives, it hits managers, it hits individual contributors who, you know, end up with all kinds of issues around alignment. You know, everybody's trying to do the things that they think are most important, but not everybody has the context to know how to prioritize, right? And you end up often emphasizing whatever's urgent over whatever is actually truly one of the most important priorities. So this affects productivity, this affects efficiency, it makes it hard for companies to make quick decisions, it makes people sit in endless meetings all day about stuff that they don't even think is important. It's just all kinds of impacts that hurt overall corporate performance. And so on the fourth slide there, just to make it a little bit more tangible, and then I'll link it to kind of how we solve this problem and how we leverage big data. But some of these questions we hear all the time. You know, top left, we missed our earnings because we executed poorly against our new strategy. What do we do now, right? I mean, that's often on the mind of an executive team after an earnings call. Or, you know, things that are a little bit more tactical on the bottom left. You know, we thought that we were going to nail this big deal that was going to make our entire quarter, and then it fell through at the last minute, and we didn't see it coming. You know, is there any way we could have announced sooner? And then the last one, and I'll come back to these questions a bit at the end and how we can address them. The last one, a really common thing, in this case IT, you know, we're an IT organization that basically exists to support the rest of the company. It could be a finance organization, it could be legal, it could be whatever. But we don't have a way to quantify who's driving our costs, and we don't have a way to sort of say which departments are demanding the most from us and create any kind of chargeback system. So all kinds of problems just associated with having thousands of people try to work together within an organization. What do we do? In the sort of social media world, you've got all kinds of advancements in big data and social graph analytics over the last several years, where, you know, Twitter, trending topics, LinkedIn and Facebook, understanding kind of different social networks and influencers and all kinds of interesting things that you can do. within those networks. Now, if you imagine, we take some of those concepts and we apply them within the enterprise. And there's some interesting differences that make, create some new possibilities. So one, when you're within within an enterprise, there's actually quite a bit more structure and quite a bit more design, like intentional design around the way people are meant to be working together, versus say Facebook. Facebook is, you just a bunch of friends and it just kind of organically grows and you just kind of do what you do and that's great. Within an organization, hundreds of millions of dollars have probably been spent on how the organization should operate, right? And there's org charts and there's project teams and there's key initiatives and there's cross-functional this and that and all these things that are meant to be happening. And that all exists in data coming out of HR systems, coming out of GL systems, all kinds of things. And then you think about, gosh, wouldn't it be interesting if you could compare what's supposed to be happening with what's actually happening? And what's actually happening, you can actually infer by pulling data out of a number of different tools that people are just using every day. The biggest of which are the corporate sort of calendar, meeting invites, and email. Also IM tools, also CRMs, also other things, but fundamentally in most particularly large organizations, the bulk of the way that people work together still goes through email and calendar. So what we do is we combine those two, that sort of structure and the sort of, call it transactions between knowledge workers through email and calendar. We combine those two and we create this, what we call social enterprise intelligence. That's, it's one of the first insights we get is we take, here's your org chart that you drew, and then we do this social graph analysis based on how people actually communicate and collaborate with one another. We say, oh, this is, on the right-hand side, this is how work actually gets done in your organization. And even those very complicated sociograph pictures, immediately when we show those to senior leadership in companies, things just jump off the page with them where they say, gosh, that explains it. That one sales group never executes, and they're never communicating with marketing, or they're never selling the things that we thought they were going to be selling, or that R&D group keeps complaining that they're getting distracted by marketing all the time, and it totally makes sense because marketing's all over them. I mean, all kinds of different insights that you can see from that. And then we start with that sort of universal picture of how the organization actually looks, and then we break it down into a number of different, more bite-sized chunks to look at kind of what are the silos, where's connectivity across the organization, what are the biggest topics that have been trending across different parts of the org, how are best performers, best performing teams operating differently than everybody else, and kind of where are their inefficiencies, where are their bottlenecks across the organization. So it's pretty fascinating what you can do. And so slide 7, just to summarize the process here, is we take that data, and as I said, primarily calendar and email as the core source, though we supplement it with others, and that provides that picture of how it actually works. And then what we do is we figure out, we work with the customer and their teams to figure out how to distill all that complexity down into the handful of new metrics and visuals that will fit within their existing cadences, inside their existing one-on-ones, inside their existing staff meetings, inside their QBRs, all kinds of different things that actually make this actionable and usable data. Last thing we want is for people to spend days and days just digging into this very complex data set. What's important is to make it very useful. So for an example of that, your weekly staff meeting, instead of everybody sitting around and saying, everybody gets 2 minutes to talk about what's going on in their department, maybe the night before everybody gets a report that says, here's how much time our group spent with every other group across the company. And then we can now talk about, does that match our priorities, yes or no? So it just adds data and transparency to that entire equation. The biggest, very important part on the bottom here is just making it easy, distilling it down to something very simple that people can look at and evaluate if they're prioritizing appropriately or not, and then make small adjustments along the way. So then coming back on slide 8 to two of those questions in the beginning that we mentioned, the left-hand side, we've done this with the customer, this exact analysis where that deal fell through at the last minute at the end of the quarter. we were able to put in the name of that company that they were selling to and look at the trends of how much interaction occurred between their sales organization and that customer or that prospect over time. And then we compared it to kind of what a normal deal looks like that closes effectively. And it was just staggering to see that the one that didn't go well, there was just much less engagement, right? And they didn't bring in other support teams across the organization. Whereas deals that close tend to correlate with certain other behaviors within the organization. So the answer is that if they had that and been looking at that on a weekly basis, they would have reacted differently, right? And they would have had an early warning that things were not on track for this to have a successful outcome. Now, on the right-hand side, we talked about chargebacks across IT groups. This is something that we do quite frequently with companies. Is we have this, we call it cost to serve metric, where we infer effectively that from both calendar invites and email, we infer how much time is being demanded of any given group by a number of other groups. So we can say, look, here's the IT organization of 100 people, 200 people, whatever it is. And then we can provide this chart on the bottom right is kind of a ranked order list of other groups and departments across the company that have taken up the most time from people in IT, right? So you often get chargeback systems that are based on something like infrastructure use or budgetary use or different financial metrics. This is actually people's time, how much time has been taken up, and that has a very real cost associated with it. So that can be translated to dollars very easily. So anyway, there's a number of different things you can do as you use these sort of big data analytic techniques to distill down this data set that really hasn't been widely explored in the past and turn it into insights to help a company operate better. And that is kind of an overview.
Well, great. Well, thanks for that, Ryan. I can really identify with this. I spent the last part of my career at Sun Microsystems, a very distributed company. That had this problem. And the other day, the former CEO, Jonathan Schwartz, was interviewed, and he said, my new little company, I can get instant instrumentation on what I sold 5 minutes ago. At Sun, he couldn't find out what happened in the past month. So I think you're addressing a real problem. They ended up getting sold to Oracle. My question, Ryan, is this like a one-time engagement? Do people get the insight and go away from you, or they use this as an ongoing engagement?
It can be either. I think some people use it in place of sort of an organizational diagnostic thing that they might want to do once a year, or just kind of identify some key issues maybe associated with a reorganization or something like that. Mm-hmm. But what we're finding is that that's interesting for companies to have that top-down look and be able to sort of see what's going on. But what it does is it identifies a bunch of opportunities. It identifies a bunch of places where, tons of hours of meetings, and sometimes literally thousands and thousands and thousands of hours that are completely wasted time, and we have metrics to sort of identify that. Mm. So usually people do that, and then they say, "Gosh, there's so many opportunities. How do we improve on these?" And so that's when they typically want to start getting into more of a cadence where a broad number of people across the organization start getting access to a subset of this data to inform, for instance, like their weekly staff meeting or their quarterly business reviews or whatever it may be. But to add this new set of operating metrics into their normal business flows, because that's once they're measuring it on a more frequent basis, then they can manage it better. So, long answer to your question, but I think you get sort of a initial interesting diagnostic from the top level. If you do it once, you actually get to realize those opportunities and improve if you work it into your regular business processes.
So what kind of customers do you engage with? Is this Fortune 500, or does it span the gamut?
It's mostly really, the bigger the company, the more acute these pain points are. As you said with your Sun example, if you're in a company with like 100 people, mm-hmm. you probably have a reasonably good handle on this kind of stuff and sort of what's going on. when you get north of 1,000 people, that starts to decline quite rapidly. So right now we're engaged. Most of the companies we're engaged with are Fortune 500. Many of them are Fortune 100. But it varies.
Sure. And then how did you get into this, Ryan? Were you one of the founders, or how did VoloMetrix get going?
Yeah, I was one of the founders. I'd previously been a business intelligence guy in a couple of startups, and then was at Cognos for a while, and ultimately got frustrated that we could do anything with data, but we didn't know what we should do with data because we didn't understand how business people thought about things. So I ended up going off and getting an MBA, and then spending a number of years as a management consultant, really still using data to help inform business decisions, just doing it without software, but developing that expertise. And so this business, after I left the consulting world a couple years ago, this business got co-founded by me and actually a senior partner at my old firm, who is our chairman and one of our early investors. And he's been a management consultant for 22 years, helping companies try to solve these problems, and struggling because there's so little data, there's so little technology to help inform them. But so about a year and a half ago we co-founded it together.
And then it would seem to me a great challenge to collect this data in that it looks like it's not very coherent. It would be, it might be log files and email. And how do you go about gathering something that isn't just sitting in a database or sitting in a spreadsheet waiting to get looked at?
Yeah. It's funny that's one of the harder parts, particularly with email and calendar, that they're just not systems that people analyze. The only tools hitting those systems are like compliance or e-discovery or archiving or things like that. So there's a lot of initial technology investment just in figuring out how to get relevant data out of those systems. But we have a number of different tools that it's different for every platform. One of the nice things is, particularly for email and calendar, unlike my old world at Cognos, when we would go in and do a BI implementation and we'd have to figure out how to integrate with 20 different custom ERPs and CRMs and all that kind of stuff, and it took months. In email and calendar, there's really only 3 platforms that matter, which Microsoft Exchange, there's Google and Gmail, and then there's Lotus. So once you support each one of those, once we've figured out the right APIs to get that data for each of those, then it's actually turnkey. It's one of the great things about this. It takes less than a week to set up at each company. And then our roadmap includes integrating with Salesforce and SharePoint and other tools along the way. But I think the big data component is really the email volume, particularly, and that's very noisy, as you say, noisy data set. A lot of it is garbage that we need to sort out, and you need to kind of pull the noise out of that. And so we have a lot of algorithms and a lot of machine learning and a lot of predictive analytics, a lot of stuff built in to be able to pull a signal out of that.
Yeah, I can just imagine that 3/4 of the mail is just forwarded mails from other people that just keep getting tagged on and incrementally adding one little sentence to it or something. But Ryan, kind of a wrap-up question here. I'm wondering if you could share any kind of aha things from customers or kind of reactions you're getting out there as they try this and learn new things.
There's been many because people have never seen this before, which is it's actually really, that's the most fun part, is to show it to a team for the first time. Let's say if I pick one, there was so one of our customers has recently went through a reorganization. They had created a new strategic marketing team that was meant to be the glue between R&D and sales, and they literally moved around the org chart for like 4,000 people, and then there were problems. Execution wasn't really happening, and they couldn't really figure out why, and they were there was a lot of debate amongst the executive team as to what was working and what wasn't. And so our our key customer was the head of this new strategic marketing group, and when we drew this sociograph picture, which effectively is that sort of network map of how how the organization's connected and how things get done, his organization of, I don't know, 1,000 people was right in the middle and was very, very clearly, indisputably the key connector and the glue across every other function across the organization. And this was very exciting evidence for him to take back to the CEO to say, hey, we are doing it right. And it's this other group that's drifting off to the right here that isn't, it's getting further and further away with every quarter. So that's one example.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing to be able to back up that kind of decision making or analysis with real data, not just people's perception in the room for once. So Ryan, I guess, just to wrap up here, is this something people can kick the tires on and try? I mean, how does your engagement work?
As I said, we typically are working with really, really large companies. We're always looking for interesting use cases to do pilots with. It's not like a freemium self-service sort of tool, but absolutely, if there's organizations that are interested in experimenting with this data, we'd love to talk to them, and they should just reach out to us through the website.
Well, excellent. Well, Ryan Fuller, I want to thank you once again for coming on the show today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You bet. Okay, folks, that's it for the Rich Report. Stay tuned for more news and information on the world of big data.